Hey everyone. Tonight we begin not with a six-shooter duel, but with a glass bottle on a dusty counter. The label reads laudanum, a mix of alcohol and opium, sold for pennies in every frontier town. Housewives sipped it to silence loneliness, mothers fed it to crying infants, and preachers kept it tucked under the pulpit. Cowboys chased wounds with morphine, while gamblers downed coca wine to play for days without sleep. Behind the gun smoke and whiskey, the Wild West was stitched together with syringes and syrup, an empire of addiction hiding in plain sight. This wasn't just a frontier of grit and gunpowder. It was one of chemical escape. Pain was dulled, hunger blurred, fear erased. But the relief carried a price, leaving behind towns of trembling hands and hollow eyes. If forgotten truths of history keep you curious, like and subscribe. And tell me, what secret of the West do you think history chose to bury? Imagine stepping off the boardwalk, your boots stirring a fine, reddish dust that drifts lazily in the warm air. The sun, a gentle warmth on your skin, casts long shadows from the rickety wooden buildings that line this frontier street. To your left, a horse whinnies softly. To your right, the distant, muffled sound of a piano playing a melancholy tune wafts from a saloon. But your gaze is drawn to a simple, unadorned sign, creaking ever so faintly, drugstore. It doesn't pulse with light or boast grand promises. It simply is. You push open the door. The dry, warm air of the street gives way to a cooler, stiller atmosphere, heavy with a peculiar scent. It's a mix of old wood, dust, and something else, a medicinal sweetness, a hint of something syrupy and potent that settles deep in your lungs. The light inside is dim, filtering through a single, grimy window, painting streaks across rough-hewn floorboards. Your eyes adjust, taking in shelves that stretch from floor to ceiling, laden not with candy or cloth, but with row upon row of glass bottles. Each one glints softly, holding secrets and promises. You notice the faded labels laudanum, morphine, coca wine, even small, elegant tins marked opium. Speaking of distant lands, it feels less like a place of healing and more like a silent, potent arsenal. There are no bustling apothecaries here, no wise physicians in crisp white coats. Instead, you might encounter a grizzled old man with surprisingly steady hands, or a sharp-eyed woman who measures out powders and liquids with practiced ease. This isn't a place of grand medicine, but of simple, stark survival, bottled and sold for pennies. A small vial here often costs less than a glass of whiskey at the saloon down the street. It's a bitter irony that the very substances meant to alleviate suffering might, in their accessibility, become a new kind of silent affliction. As you stand there, an unspoken truth whispers through the quiet room, a knowledge that settles heavy in the air. Many who stood tall in this town, the mayor, the respected lawyer, even the occasional doctor, harbored a secret. They were tethered, subtly, silently, to the very compounds they dispensed. Their addictions often left unrecorded, hidden behind the respectable facades of frontier life. The West, you realize, perhaps didn't solely run on law and order, on the grit of prospectors and the courage of cowboys. It ran, in a profound and overlooked way, on laudanum and the quiet, desperate lies that kept the illusion alive. You close the drugstore door softly behind you, the faint chime of a bell echoing your departure. The sun feels brighter now, almost too bright, as if you've stepped out of a shaded memory and into the stark reality of the frontier. You look around, seeing the faces of women walking by a young wife with a baby clutched close, a school teacher, the preacher's wife. They embody the strength and resilience of the West, the backbone of a budding society. Yet, as your gaze lingers, you sense a quiet, almost imperceptible vulnerability beneath their composed exteriors. Imagine the long, desolate hours in a log cabin, the wind sighing through the chinks in the walls, the vast, unforgiving landscape stretching out beyond the single window. Loneliness here wasn't just an emotion, it was a physical presence, a cold, persistent ache. For these frontier wives, these pillars of respectable society, the burdens were immense, the ceaseless chores, the isolation, the harshness of daily life. And when the children cried, when sleep refused to come, or when the sheer weight of existence became too heavy to bear, there was often a small, amber bottle tucked away, a quiet secret shared with no one. You can almost hear the gentle click of a spoon against glass in the silent watches of the night. A single spoonful of laudanum, that potent elixir of alcohol and opium, offered a momentary reprieve. It quieted the infant's cries, a temporary peace for tired parents. 2 spoonfuls, perhaps, and the rough-hewn walls of the cabin began to soften. The anxieties of the day blurred, transforming harsh reality into a hazy, dreamlike landscape. It was a secret ritual, often performed in the flickering glow of a tallow candle, a desperate quest for solace. Even the most innocent among them, the infants themselves, were not spared. Many soothing syrups, commonly available, were laced with morphine, marketed as gentle remedies to help babies sleep through the night. The promise was simple, a quiet home, a peaceful night's rest. But the hidden truth was far darker, a tragedy whispered only in the records. Thousands of infant deaths, attributed blandly to fevers or sudden illnesses, were, in heartbreaking reality, likely silent overdoses. This dark facet of addiction became the clean secret of Victorian respectability. The very act of seeking peace could become an unintentional, devastating act of harm. It leaves a chilling thought in the West, perhaps. Babies didn't just cry. Sometimes they overdosed, politely and tragically, in the quiet solitude of their cabins, their stories buried beneath layers of euphemism and forgotten history. As you walk further down the dusty street, the sounds from the saloon grow louder, beckoning you closer. The air thickens with the mingled scents of stale tobacco smoke, cheap whiskey, and unwashed bodies. You push open the swinging doors, and a cacophony of sound washes over you. The off-key plink of a piano, the clatter of poker chips, boisterous laughter, and the low rumble of male voices. The light inside is dim, filtering through the haze of cigar smoke that hangs heavy and blue. Whiskey, you observe, is the declared king here. It flows freely, a steady river of amber liquid that fuels the games, the arguments, and the occasional burst of song. But even here, in this bastion of apparent vice, a deeper, more insidious current runs beneath the surface. You notice the subtle nuances, the glint in a gambler's eye that seems too bright, the unnatural endurance of a cowboy who's been at the poker table for hours on end, his focus unwavering. Whiskey, it turns out, wasn't always enough to chase away the demons or to sustain the relentless pace of frontier life. Bartenders, you learn, were often more than just pourers of spirits. They were alchemists of sorts, discreetly spiking their customers' drinks with something stronger, something that offered a longer, more potent escape. A dash of opium, dissolved silently into a glass, or a generous pour of coca wine. That heady mix that promised boundless energy and a sharpened mind. You see the cowboys, their faces etched with fatigue but their eyes wide, playing poker for an astonishing 36 hours straight, fueled by an unseen fire. Until finally, when the chemical wore off, they collapsed like rag dolls. The hidden truth here is a chilling one, painting a new backdrop for the legendary violence of the West. Many of the infamous shootouts, often romanticized as whiskey-fueled duels of honor, were, in a darker reality, born from cocaine-fueled paranoia, the intense jitters and suspicious thoughts that only a powerful stimulant could induce. The legends of the swift-drawing gunfighters, their nerves of steel and their unwavering aim, were often born not in sober duels under the scorching sun, but in the drugged delirium of a dimly lit saloon, where reality blurred and the line between fear and aggression vanished. It's a dark twist to the romanticized image, where poker, whiskey, and opium formed a true, unholy trinity of the West, shaping destinies and spilling blood in ways history chose to selectively forget. And still, the piano plays, a melancholic backdrop to the unspoken tragedies. You step out of the saloon, the bright sunlight a welcome cleanse after the smoky interior. The street, though still dusty, feels a little less burdened. You walk past the general store, the blacksmith, and the livery stable, until the architecture begins to subtly shift. The rough-hewn wooden facades give way to buildings with a more ornate, often brightly painted, appearance. Lanterns hang from awnings, even in daylight, and the air takes on a different scent, a delicate blend of spices, cooking food, and something else, something smoky and sweet, yet subtly foreign. You've entered Chinatown, a distinct world within the frontier town. The sounds here are softer, a murmur of unfamiliar languages, the clatter of dishes from a small eatery, the gentle rustle of silk. As you wander deeper, you notice the doors that seem less like entrances and more like veiled secrets. They open, not into bustling shops, but into dim, hushed interiors. You feel a gentle curiosity pulling you, an urge to understand what lies beyond these modest thresholds. You push open one such door, and the world outside seems to fall away. Inside, the air is thick, not with cigar smoke, but with a fragrant, heavy haze that clings to your clothes and settles in your hair. It's the unmistakable scent of burning opium, sweet and cloying, yet somehow alluring. The light is provided by small, flickering lamps, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls and illuminating figures reclined on simple bunks or platforms. They lie in a peaceful, almost meditative state, their faces serene, their eyes half closed. Here, the struggle of the frontier, the harsh demands of daily life, seem to simply melt away, replaced by a profound, languid calm. These dens, you learn, were not merely places of vice, but also spaces of survival. Many of the Chinese immigrants who arrived in America, lured by the promise of gold and work on the railroads, found themselves barred from mining claims and facing prejudice. Opium dens became a way for them to carve out a living, to create a haven, however fleeting, from a hostile world. It's a bitter irony that while white Americans often curse the yellow peril by day, fearing competition and cultural erosion by night. Many of them would seek solace and escape within these very same walls, sharing pipes and silence with those they reviled in the sun. The hidden truth here reveals a deeper connection to the very infrastructure that tamed the West. The Transcontinental Railroad, that marvel of engineering and symbol of progress, became an unwitting pipeline for opium, bringing the drug from distant shores directly into the heart of frontier towns. It's a stark reminder that America's own frontier, seemingly isolated, was subtly haunted by the echoes of distant drug wars and the global empire's complicated trade routes. It makes you wonder about the duality of perception, where the yellow peril by morning could transform into the yellow pillow by night, offering a shared, if unspoken, escape. And the gentle, fragrant smoke continues to curl towards the low ceiling, carrying away the worries of those within. You step back out into the street, leaving the sweet, heavy scent of opium behind, and a sudden, sharp sound shatters the relative calm. A gunshot, then another. Your heart leaps, adrenaline surging. Down the street, near the saloon, a commotion erupts, shouts, the thud of bodies, and then the sickening sight of a cowboy clutching his gut, stumbling and falling to the dusty ground, his screams piercing the air. A small crowd gathers, but there's a desperate urgency in their movements. You feel a rush of helplessness, a sense of raw, exposed vulnerability that the frontier so often demanded. There's no grand hospital here, no sterile operating room with skilled surgeons, just the rough and ready improvisation of a town on the edge of civilization. You watch as willing hands carry the wounded cowboy into the nearest saloon, laying him gently but quickly onto a sturdy wooden table, stained with countless spills. His face is contorted in agony, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Someone rips open his shirt, revealing a dark, blossoming stain. You brace yourself, expecting to see a grim, painful struggle for life. Perhaps a crude attempt at surgery, or a slow, agonizing decline. But then, a different kind of ritual unfolds. A small vial is produced. A hypodermic needle glints in the dim light, and a clear liquid is drawn up. It's morphine. The needle is plunged into his arm, and you hold your breath. For a moment, nothing changes. The screams persist. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, a change begins. The intensity in his eyes softens. The rigid tension in his body loosens. His screams fade into groans, then into a quiet, almost peaceful silence. His eyes glaze over, distant and unfocused, as if peering into another world. The agony that had gripped him so fiercely seems to dissolve, replaced by a profound, albeit chemically induced, calm. This scene, you realize, played out countless times across the vast expanse of the American West. The hidden truth reveals a profound and tragic legacy left by the recently concluded Civil War. Tens of thousands of veterans, many of them just young men, carried with them not only the physical scars of battle, but also an invisible wound, soldier's disease, the euphemism for morphine addiction, after suffering grievous injuries on the battlefields. They were introduced to morphine as a potent painkiller, a miraculous balm for their suffering. And when they journeyed westward, seeking new lives, new beginnings, they carried their addiction with them, a silent, relentless companion. Many who had survived the bullets of war became lifelong prisoners of this powerful opiate. The bullet wound, you reflect, might have lasted mere minutes, its agony a finite experience. But the morphine addiction, born of necessity and desperation, often lasted a lifetime, a quiet, daily struggle that followed them, from the horrors of war to the promises of the frontier. It's a sobering thought, a dark stain on the heroic narrative, a realization that courage and grit often masked a deeper, more pervasive dependency. And as the cowboy lies there, quieted by the drug, you see not just a man saved from pain, but a soul potentially ensnared, his future now linked to the silent companion in the vial. The image of the quieted cowboy lingers in your mind as you step back into the cool night air. The moon hangs high, casting a silvery glow over the town, transforming familiar buildings into ghostly silhouettes. The sounds of the day have receded, replaced by the soft hoot of an owl and the distant, mournful howl of a coyote. Yet, even in this deceptive calm, you sense a simmering undercurrent, a tension that the darkness cannot fully conceal. You imagine the long, relentless nights in the saloon, where cheap whiskey flowed, but the true currents ran deeper with coca wine and morphine. You envision a single night, a particularly wild one, where the pursuit of escape transcended limits. The saloon floor, usually just sticky with spilled drinks, becomes a grim tableau, littered with bodies, not from bullets, but from binges their consciousness surrendered to the overwhelming power of the chemicals they had consumed. It's a silent, somber scene, punctuated only by the shallow, ragged breaths of those who still cling to life, or the chilling stillness of those who have succumbed. You might see one man, his face contorted not by pain, but by terror, shrieking incoherently, his heart exploding in his chest as he stumbles out into the deserted street, collapsing beneath the indifferent gaze of the moon. Another, still seated at a poker table, his hand of cards splayed before him, laughs hysterically, a manic, unsettling sound that echoes in the quiet room, until, just as suddenly, it stops. His head slumps forward, his brief, chemically induced joy extinguished forever. These weren't just anecdotes. They were grim realities, quiet tragedies playing out in the dark corners of the West. The hidden truth here, you understand, is that the local papers, ever eager to maintain an image of a burgeoning, adventurous frontier, often shrouded these deaths in euphemisms. They were reported as sunstrokes, even in the dead of night, or simply sudden illness, vague and uninvestigated, leaving no real trace of the true cause. The violence on the frontier, you realize, wasn't solely about the crack of a six-shooter or the clash of opposing wills. It was also, profoundly and often, about drug psychosis, the paranoia, the uncontrolled aggression, the catastrophic physiological effects that turned ordinary men into figures of terror or victims of their own desperate escapes. It makes you reflect on the deep, unspoken fear that must have permeated these towns. It wasn't just the fear of Indians, or outlaws, or even the lawless elements. It was a more intimate fear, a fear of their own hangovers, of the terrifying aftermath when the chemicals wore off, or when they simply overpowered the body, the shadows of the frontier. You now perceive, held not just the promise of new beginnings, but also the haunting specter of addiction, transforming the silent landscape into a stage for unseen, often self-inflicted, tragedies. And still, the wind whispers, carrying no easy answers. as dawn breaks, painting the sky in soft hues of rose and gold. The quiet of the night gradually gives way to the stirring of the town. You hear the distant crow of a rooster, the jingle of harness bells, and the creak of wagons lumbering down the street. Your attention is drawn to a particularly flamboyant wagon, painted in bright, eye-catching colors, adorned with banners proclaiming miraculous cures. It rumbles into the town square, pulling up with a flourish, and soon, a small crowd begins to gather, drawn by curiosity and perhaps by a flicker of desperate hope. From the wagon emerges a figure straight out of a traveling show, a man with a booming voice, a grand mustache, and an air of theatrical confidence. He's a charlatan, a snake oil salesman. But to the anxious, often ailing citizens of the frontier, he is a beacon of hope. He stands on a makeshift stage, his voice cutting through the morning air, promising wonders. His bottles, arrayed on a small table, glint enticingly in the soft light. He claims they can heal everything: the hacking cough of consumption, the silent torment of madness, the aching void of heartbreak, the chronic pain of overworked bodies. You watch the faces in the crowd: the weary farmer with a persistent cough, the mother whose child frets ceaselessly, the old man whose joints ache with every step. They listen intently, their expressions a mix of skepticism and yearning. They crave relief, a simple answer to their complex suffering. The charlatan's words are a balm, a promise of a better tomorrow. And what are these miracle cures, you wonder? These potent elixirs that promise so much? The truth, you surmise, is far less miraculous and far more insidious. Many of these bottles contain a potent cocktail of opium, cocaine, or other narcotics, often diluted with colored water, flavored with sugars, and passed off as pure, unadulterated healing. The hidden truth here is a fascinating and disturbing thread that connects this dusty frontier to the modern world. Many of the sprawling corporations that dominate today's pharmaceutical and consumer markets trace their origins back to these very 19th century drug frauds. What began as a charismatic huckster selling a cocaine-laced tonic could, through clever marketing and a growing customer base, evolve into a reputable company, their past quietly sanitized. And in the immediate moment, the customers would indeed feel something. They might faint from the sheer potency of the compounds, or experience a profound sense of euphoria, a temporary cessation of pain. They would declare themselves cured, believing in the magic, their immediate relief a powerful testament to the efficacy of the medicine. It's a dark, almost comedic irony. Every miracle cure worked, you think, with a wry smile. If it didn't cure the sickness, it cured the patient's need to exist. The promises were grand, the delivery often dangerous, and the underlying truth a stark reminder of humanity's enduring vulnerability to both suffering and the allure of an easy fix. And as the charlatan's voice booms, drawing in more eager listeners, the promise of relief hangs heavy in the air, a potent blend of hope and deception. The day progresses, and as you observe the rhythm of this frontier town, a subtle pattern begins to emerge. It's not just the isolated individual, the wounded cowboy, or the lonely wife who seeks solace in the bottle. It's something far more pervasive, a silent, almost communal entanglement. You see the children playing in the dusty street, their laughter sometimes too subdued, their movements occasionally too languid. You notice the men in their daily labors, some with an unnatural vigor, others with a palpable weariness that seems to transcend mere exhaustion. You begin to connect the dots. following the threads of quiet observation. The frontier wives, their hands busy with mending or baking, often carry that subtle air of distance, perhaps a legacy of their laudanum-induced dreamscapes. The husbands, stoic and strong, might also harbor their own hidden dependency on morphine, a silent companion to their arduous days. And even the children, their innocence seemingly protected, are not immune. Their cries, once soothed by sweet syrups, carry the potential for addiction from their earliest days. You even imagine the pastor, delivering impassioned sermons against the sins of the flesh on Sunday morning. Yet by evening, he might find his own comfort in the warming embrace of cocoa wine, tucked away from judgmental eyes. This isn't merely a scattering of individuals struggling in isolation. It's a town steeped in shadows, silently, almost universally, intoxicated. The morning sermons denounce sin with righteous fury, the words ringing hollow against the unspoken reality. Yet, as evening descends, the pursuit of escape begins anew, ending in the quiet uncorking of bottles, the clandestine measuring of drops, the shared, unspoken agreement of a community adrift. The hidden truth here reveals a profound economic undercurrent that sustained these frontier outposts. Some frontier towns, you realize, survived not primarily on the gold they dug, the cattle they raised, or the crops they harvested. Their true sustenance, their economic lifeline, flowed from the trade of drugs, the drugstore, the saloon, the quiet dens. These became the unofficial engines of commerce, a steady stream of currency exchanged for oblivion. And in this deeply enmeshed community, crime, fueled by desperation and delusion, soared. Overdoses, once whispered, became grimly common. Yet a shroud of silence, a collective denial, hung heavy over it all. It makes you ponder the very foundation of belief and morality in such a place. God ruled on Sundays. You reflect, a quiet thought in your mind. But laudanum ruled the rest. The moral compass of the community, while outwardly upheld, was subtly, consistently undermined by the pervasive, unspoken reality of addiction. This wasn't a town on the brink of collapse, but a town functioning, enduring, and even thriving under the profound influence of chemical escape. And the subtle hum of daily life continues, a backdrop to the quiet, potent secrets held within every home, every heart, every bottle. As time flows onward, the frontier begins to slowly transform. The raw edges of settlements soften. Towns grow into cities, and with growth comes a new kind of scrutiny. The pervasive shadows of addiction, once so easily dismissed or hidden, begin to stir in the growing light of public discourse. You imagine the gradual shift in awareness, perhaps sparked by a courageous journalist or a particularly tragic series of events that could no longer be swept under the rug of sunstroke or sudden illness. By the late 19th century, the whispers turn into shouts. Newspapers, once silent conspirators in the myth of the Stoic West, begin to expose the grim reality of the drug epidemic. Shocking articles detail the widespread use of opium, morphine, and cocaine, not just in the notorious opium dens, but in respectable homes, in doctors' bags, and in the everyday tonics sold on every corner. The public, slowly but surely, begins to grasp the true extent of the problem, the decades of quiet suffering that had permeated their society. The outrage builds, a slow, inexorable tide of public consciousness that eventually reaches the halls of power. It culminates in legislative action, a formal acknowledgement of the crisis. You see the passing of the 1914 Harrison Narcotics Act, a landmark moment that finally cracked down on the unregulated sale and distribution of morphine, cocaine, and opium. It was a decisive step, a clear signal that the era of open, casual access to potent narcotics was drawing to a close. The law, you recognize, was finally catching up to the pervasive problem that had shaped the frontier for so long. Yet, a profound, almost heartbreaking irony accompanies this long-awaited reform. The hidden truth reveals that many of the very lawmakers who crafted and passed these strict restrictions had themselves, in earlier times, been participants in the very system they now sought to dismantle. Perhaps they were former addicts who had found their own difficult path to sobriety. Or perhaps they had once profited from the drug trade, or simply used the compounds openly and without consequence. This makes the reform feel both necessary and, in a way, tinged with a complex hypocrisy, a belated reckoning with a past that could not be fully erased. The arrival of legal reform, you reflect, was decades too late for many. Whole generations, from the lonely frontier wives to the wounded Civil War veterans, from the gambling cowboys to the infants quieted by syrup, had already been lost to the insidious grip of addiction. The law, it seems, came on horseback, a noble but belated messenger, long after the drugs had arrived by train, by wagon, and by the eager hands of settlers seeking solace. It's a bittersweet victory, a closing of the barn door after a stampede of silent suffering, leaving behind a legacy that would continue to echo through the nascent century. And still, the winds of change blow, carrying with them the faint, lingering scent of a forgotten past. You stand now at the edge of the frontier, looking back not at a specific town, but at the sweeping canvas of the Wild West itself. The sun dips low, casting long and purple shadows across the landscape, and a quiet stillness settles over the land. You envision the iconic images, burned into the collective memory by Hollywood, the rugged cowboy, strong and independent, a flask of whiskey on his hip, his six-shooter ready, embodying grit and self-reliance. This is the legend, the story told and retold, bright and clear under a vast blue sky. But now, you see something different, something beneath the surface of that romanticized myth. The reality, as it has slowly unfolded before you, is richer, darker, and infinitely more complex. You see that same cowboy, but this time, his grit is tempered by the quiet desperation of morphine, a silent battle waged within. You see the frontier wife, her strength undeniable, but her solace often found in the gentle lull of laudanum. And you see the children, not just playing freely, but sometimes drifting, quieted by the syrup that promised peace but delivered addiction. The heroic narrative, you realize, was carefully curated, one where the raw, often uncomfortable truths were gently, systematically erased. The hidden truth, now unveiled, reveals that the frontier was as much about syringes as it was about six-shooters. It was a landscape shaped by the subtle, pervasive presence of the bottle as much as by the crack of a gun. The myth, carefully constructed over generations, chose to erase the vial, to forget the tremor in a hand, the glazed look in an eye, the quiet desperation that ran through the veins of countless pioneers. It's a profound revision, a new lens through which to view a celebrated era. You look back at the legend, at the saloon, at the poker table, at the figures etched in history, and now, your gaze is drawn not just to the whiskey glass, but to a small, amber vial of laudanum, sitting quietly, almost innocently, on the corner of that saloon table. It was always there, an unspoken truth, a silent witness to the daily struggles and hidden escapes that defined a generation. The Wild West, you understand now, wasn't solely built on grit and gunpowder. It was stitched together, thread by fragile thread, with the pervasive, powerful presence of syringes, a testament to a human need for escape that transcended the simple stories. And as the last light of day fades, leaving the landscape in shadow, you carry this deeper truth with you, a quiet echo of a past that chose to hide its most profound secrets in plain sight. Our story begins in the mists of antiquity, far from the bustling frontier towns of the American West. Picture, if you will, the serene landscapes of ancient China, around 2727 BC. Here, amidst the quiet wisdom of early civilizations, we find the earliest recorded observations of cannabis, not as a recreational substance, but as a revered botanical ally. Imagine scholars in tranquil gardens, their minds attuned to the rhythms of nature, patiently cataloging the properties of every leaf and root. It was here that Emperor Shen Nung, revered as the divine farmer and said to have introduced agriculture and medicine to China, first documented the plant's extraordinary therapeutic potential. He observed its gentle efficacy in alleviating a spectrum of human discomforts, from persistent aches to the gnawing pains of illness. Consider the gentle rustle of hemp fields under the quiet gaze of an ancient moon. Its fibers were gathered not for any intoxicating purpose, but for profound, practical healing. It soothed deep, internal pains, quieted sleepless nights, and calmed troubled stomachs. Imagine the careful preparation: leaves steeped in warm water for a soothing tea, or ground into a fine powder for poultices, applied with quiet reverence for its power. It offered a reprieve from common ailments, a natural balm in a world where suffering was often an unavoidable companion. The plant was, in these early days, a quiet secret of comfort, a botanical whisper of relief passed down through generations. From the tranquil valleys of the East, the gentle seeds of cannabis began their slow, deliberate journey westward, carried by currents of trade and human curiosity. By the time of the ancient Greeks and Romans, this remarkable plant had found new homes across the Mediterranean. Picture the bustling marketplaces of Athens, or the grand forums of Rome, where ideas and goods flowed freely. Here, cannabis was embraced in a multifaceted role, woven into the very fabric of daily life and sacred practices. It might have been present in the hushed ceremonies of priestesses, its subtle vapors perhaps guiding them toward contemplative states, or offered as a remedy by the learned physicians of the era. Both philosopher and healer acknowledged its quiet power. But beyond its ceremonial and medicinal uses, the plant also served a more humble, yet equally vital purpose. Its robust fibers were expertly spun into textiles. Imagine the strong, durable ropes that bound their ships, allowing them to navigate the vast, blue expanse of the sea. Picture the sturdy sails that billowed in the Mediterranean winds, propelling vessels laden with goods and ambitions. Think of the rough, comforting texture of hempen cloth, used for clothing, sacks, and other necessities, a testament to the plant's versatility and strength. Its presence was pervasive, a quiet workhorse supporting the grand ambitions of these powerful empires. As the Islamic Empire blossomed and Arab traders embarked on intrepid journeys. The story of cannabis continued to unfold, carried across vast deserts and shimmering seas. From the Fertile Crescent, it spread its influence into North Africa, becoming an integral part of new cultures and traditions. Imagine the rhythmic thud of camel hooves on the ancient Silk Road, caravans laden with spices, silks, and the subtle, potent seeds of this plant. In these new lands, cannabis was adopted, sometimes for its medicinal qualities, sometimes for its ability to foster social connection in quiet, contemplative gatherings. The Arabic word hashish began its gentle journey into the lexicon, signifying a new chapter in the plant's cultural narrative. Centuries later, as the age of exploration dawned, Europe, ever in search of new resources, recognized the profound utility of cannabis. Its fibers were paramount for ambitious voyages across uncharted oceans. The tall ships that would carry explorers to new worlds were dependent on hemp for their rigging and sails. Without these robust, natural materials, the grand expeditions, the very spirit of discovery, would have been severely hampered. Then, in the 1500s, a pivotal moment arrived as the Spanish conquistadors, sailing across the formidable Atlantic, brought cannabis seeds to the New World, specifically to Chile. Their primary intent was not for healing or ritual, but for fiber production. These hemp fields were envisioned as crucial to sustaining nascent colonial endeavors, providing raw materials for a growing empire. Thus, a humble plant, having journeyed with empires across continents and millennia, now stood on the precipice of a new chapter, about to subtly, yet profoundly, change the landscape and destiny of the Americas. Its quiet presence, once a secret of ancient medicine, was now poised to become an essential component in the bustling expansion of a burgeoning colonial power, its roots gently spreading into virgin soil. The year is 1611. The scent of pine and damp earth hangs heavy in the air of the New World. A ship, weary from its arduous Atlantic crossing, docks silently near the fledgling settlement of Jamestown, Virginia. On board, nestled carefully amongst other provisions, were the first hemp plants to ever grace American soil. These tender seedlings, or perhaps carefully selected seeds, represented not a quest for medicine or ritual, but a deeply pragmatic desire for survival and economic prosperity. English colonists, clinging to their precarious foothold in this wild, untamed land, understood the vital role hemp played back home. Its fibers meant sturdy ropes, strong sails, and durable textiles, essentials for both the journey and the arduous task of building a new society. Just 8 years later, in 1619, the importance of this resilient plant was solidified by a royal decree from across the ocean. King James I, ever focused on England's burgeoning maritime power, issued a clear order: every colonist in Virginia was mandated to plant 100 hemp plants. This wasn't a suggestion. It was an imperial directive. Imagine families, already struggling with the harsh realities of colonial life, now faced with cultivating this particular crop. The Virginia Company, funding the Jamestown venture, saw hemp as a critical engine for England's expansion, a renewable resource that would fuel its growing navy and global trade ambitions. The quiet promise of hemp, therefore, was not merely about sustenance, but about empire. As the years unfolded, sun-drenched fields of Virginia began to tell a new story. Amidst the whispering grasses and towering trees, hemp fields proliferated, stretching across the landscape. This was a plant that thrived in the fertile American soil, its tall stalks reaching toward the sky with silent determination. It quickly rose in prominence, rivaling even tobacco, that other immensely lucrative, yet somewhat controversial, colonial crop. While tobacco brought swift, intoxicating profit, hemp provided the foundational materials for the long-term strength and self-sufficiency of the colony. The plant's widespread cultivation wasn't confined to the common settler. It reached the very pinnacle of early American leadership. Imagine the vast estates of men like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, architects of a new nation, on their sprawling properties, amid rows of various crops. You would have found extensive fields of hemp. They were not just statesmen and philosophers. They were pragmatic farmers, deeply aware of the plant's economic and strategic value. For them, cultivating hemp was a matter of national importance, an investment in the future strength and independence of the nascent United States. They understood that the destiny of a young nation, vulnerable on the seas, was deeply intertwined with the reliable output of these robust plants. These vast hemp fields across the colonies became veritable arteries of supply, feeding the ever-growing demand for rope and sails. The rhythmic creak of rope-making machinery, the gentle flap of newly woven canvas in the breeze. These were the sounds of progress and strategic self-reliance. The strength and durability of hemp fibers were unmatched, making them indispensable for the rigging of ships, the hawsers for docking, and the vast expanses of canvas that captured the wind. This continuous supply was absolutely critical for empowering England's mighty navy, and later, the burgeoning U.S. Navy. Picture bustling shipyards, the smell of tar and timber heavy in the air, as craftsmen meticulously crafted vessels that would carry goods, defend sovereignty, and explore distant shores. Every ship, from the smallest merchant sloop to the most formidable warship, relied on hemp. It was the silent, humble backbone of maritime power, a testament to its enduring utility. The whispers of the wind through those colonial hemp fields carried the promise of an independent future, a future built, in no small part, on the strong, unassuming fibers of this extraordinary plant. The story of cannabis in America, therefore, begins not with rebellion or recreation, but with the quiet, foundational strength of its fibers, literally weaving itself into the very fabric of the emerging nation. As the young American nation grew and expanded westward, so too did the quiet proliferation of hemp farms. Imagine the vast, untamed beauty of the American landscape slowly transforming into cultivated fields, stretching for miles under the broad, open sky. In states like Kentucky with its rich bluegrass, Mississippi with its humid lands, Georgia basking in the southern sun, California with its diverse climate, the Carolinas and Nebraska, everywhere the soil was amenable, hemp found a home. These were landscapes of quiet industry, their tall, green stalks swaying gently in the breeze, a testament to the plant's adaptable nature. Its robust presence became a familiar sight, a silent economic engine for countless rural communities, its fibers continuing to serve practical purposes. Then, in 1839, a significant shift occurred. Irish physician, Dr. William O'Shaughnessy, having spent years observing traditional medicine in India, introduced cannabis to Western medical science. His meticulous research brought to light the plant's remarkable therapeutic properties, previously unknown or largely forgotten in Europe and America. It was a moment of quiet revelation, a rediscovery of ancient wisdom, filtered through emerging scientific inquiry. Dr. O'Shaughnessy's findings began to permeate the medical community. He detailed how cannabis could be used with gentle effectiveness for a variety of conditions. Imagine the quiet relief it offered to those suffering from debilitating spasms, its calming effects easing tense muscles. Consider its role as a gentle anodyne, helping to bring tranquility to those plagued by insomnia, allowing weary minds to finally find restful slumber. For individuals enduring the relentless throbbing of migraines, or the persistent ache of chronic pain, cannabis offered a merciful reprieve, a quiet balm in a world with limited pharmaceutical options. It wasn't a miracle cure, but a significant, gentle aid. By the mid-19th century, this once exotic Eastern remedy had become a commonplace sight across the burgeoning United States. Picture the quaint, bustling apothecaries that dotted every American town, their shelves lined with neatly labeled bottles and jars. Among them, almost certainly, you would have found cannabis. It was sold openly, without stigma, a trusted component of the physician's toolkit and a readily available household remedy. This was a time before many synthetic drugs, when botanical remedies held a prominent place in healing practices. The plant, in various forms, tinctures, extracts, even simple dried preparations, was accessible to anyone seeking relief, prescribed by doctors and recommended by pharmacists. Its reputation grew steadily, earning it the moniker the painkiller of the century. This was a significant title in an era before modern analgesics. Cannabis offered a profound, if gentle, solution, a quiet workhorse in the medical field. It served this crucial role for decades, providing comfort and relief, until the eventual arrival of aspirin in the late 19th century began to shift the pharmaceutical landscape. Visualize the warm glow of gaslight illuminating those apothecary shelves, row upon row of dark amber bottles, each bearing a simple yet powerful label, cannabis extract. These bottles represented hope, relief, and the quiet intersection of ancient wisdom and modern practice. They stood as a testament to a time when cannabis was embraced, understood, and integrated into the very fabric of American medicine. It was an era where the plant was seen not as a threat, but as a valued companion in the journey toward wellness. A chapter often forgotten in the shadow of later controversies. The transformation from a field crop to a trusted pharmaceutical was complete, deeply rooted in the pragmatic healing traditions of the era. The mid-19th century, while a time of great expansion and innovation, also brought a growing desire for order and control. As medicines became more widely available and potent, concerns emerged about their proper use and potential dangers. A subtle shift in public perception and governmental oversight began to take hold, gradually tightening the reins on what had been a largely unregulated market. This new era brought cautious scrutiny to all forms of medicine, including, inevitably, cannabis. The days of its unquestioned presence on every pharmacy shelf were slowly drawing to a close. This burgeoning anxiety manifested in a flurry of legislative activity. 29 states across the nation began to pass various cannabis-related laws. These were not outright prohibitions, but rather a nascent attempt to categorize, control, and understand a substance still somewhat mysterious in its effects. Imagine the varied discussions in state legislatures, reflecting differing local concerns. Some states moved to require doctors' prescriptions, a first step toward limiting access and ensuring professional oversight. Others opted for a more stark visual warning, mandating a vivid red poison label to be affixed to cannabis preparations, indicating growing apprehension. One pivotal moment occurred in New York in 1860. Following a series of tragic incidents, specifically suicides where cannabis was implicated. Though often without a clear understanding of its true role, the state took a decisive step. Cannabis was officially classified as a poison. This was a profound turning point, marking its departure from benign remedies into a category of potentially dangerous substances. Imagine the public discourse, the sensational newspaper headlines, the fear such incidents would generate. The once trusted painkiller of the century was beginning to acquire a shadowed reputation. California also witnessed these early stirrings of apprehension. In 1880, a bill was introduced to restrict the sales of both opium and hemp. While ultimately withdrawn, its introduction signaled a growing fear, a societal unease regarding potential for abuse and perceived moral decay. The public imagination, influenced by both genuine concerns and burgeoning prejudices, was beginning to weave a new, more sinister narrative around cannabis. The implications of these legislative shifts were far-reaching. Cannabis, for centuries an everyday remedy, slowly but inexorably began its transition into a suspicious substance. Imagine the quiet doubt creeping into the minds of ordinary people, the red poison labels, the need for prescriptions, the sensationalized reports, all contributed to a profound reevaluation of its place in society. The plant that had aided countless individuals was now being viewed through a lens of caution, fear, and growing disapproval. This period was a slow-motion unraveling of cannabis's trusted status, a gradual erosion of its perceived innocence. As the 19th century drew to a close, the whispers of ancient wisdom began to be drowned out by the louder, more urgent warnings of a modernizing society. The stage was being set for a dramatic shift in its narrative, moving it from the light of the pharmacy to the shadows of suspicion. A transformation that would ultimately lead to far-reaching consequences. As the 19th century progressed, America's frontier expanded with relentless energy. This era, characterized by rugged individualism and hardship, inadvertently created ideal conditions for a particular plant to flourish: wild cannabis. Imagine vast stretches of land, cleared by settlers, becoming ripe for opportunistic growth. Fields once tamed for other crops, or simply disturbed by human activity, became perfect ground for cannabis seeds to take root and thrive. It wasn't intentionally cultivated for recreational use, but appeared as a hardy, wild plant, a silent companion to the frontier's expansion. For poor settlers and pioneering families, life was a continuous struggle. Tobacco, often a cash crop, was not always readily available or affordable. In this environment of resourcefulness, wild cannabis became a quiet substitute. Imagine the simple relief it offered, perhaps smoked in a crude pipe or rolled into a rough cigarette, providing a moment of respite from endless toil. For the first time on a significant scale, cannabis was widely smoked not for its medicinal properties, but explicitly for its high, a novel shift in its societal role within America. Picture the flickering glow of campfires against the immense, star-dusted frontier sky. Around these fires, tales were spun, songs sung, and the day's weariness momentarily forgotten. Here, amidst the quiet camaraderie, cowboys, prospectors, and pioneers shared crude cannabis rolls. The pungent aroma would mingle with wood smoke and roasted coffee, becoming another sensory detail in the rich tapestry of frontier life. This wasn't a formal ritual or prescribed medicine. It was a simple, communal act, a shared moment of escape. Dusty saloons also became settings where cannabis found its place. Imagine the cacophony of piano music, clinking glasses, and boisterous laughter. In the smoky haze, alongside potent whiskey and the clatter of gambling. A new element was quietly introduced to the Wild West cocktail. Opium, already present, found a new companion in weed. This unique blend of substances fueled and perhaps dulled the sharp edges of frontier life. The frontier, with its blurred lines of law and order, provided fertile ground for uninhibited experimentation. As its use became more widespread, cannabis earned itself a new nickname, the frontier's weed. This moniker spoke volumes about its association with the untamed spirit of the West, inextricably linked with the culture of outlaws, cowboys, and those living on the fringes of settled society. It was part of the unspoken code, a subtle rebellion. Imagine the silent understanding between men, the shared experience of seeking solace or exhilaration in the simple act of lighting a cannabis roll under a vast, indifferent sky. This period represents a fascinating, often overlooked, chapter in the plant's history. It was a time when cannabis shed its previous identities as ancient medicine or colonial fiber, and began to forge a new one, a recreational substance, a quiet companion to the wild, restless spirit of the American frontier. Its presence in these remote and lawless territories meant it was largely unregulated, passed hand to hand among those who sought a temporary escape or a mild alteration of consciousness. The seeds of this recreational use, sown in the vast, untamed spaces of the West, would quietly germinate and grow, eventually leading to profound and often turbulent societal shifts, fundamentally altering how America perceived and interacted with this once humble plant. The echoes of the U.S. Mexican War, which concluded in 1848, brought not only vast territorial changes, but also a subtle, profound cultural shift across the American Southwest. As the newly drawn border became more porous, Mexican laborers, seeking work and fleeing turmoil, migrated northward into states like Texas and California. With them, they carried their traditions, their food, their music, and a plant known in their language as marijuana. This was not just a name. It was a cultural practice, a way of life, and it marked a significant turning point in the story of cannabis in America. The term marijuana, often pronounced with a soft, rolling R, was initially a descriptor for a specific preparation of the plant, usually smoked. Texas, with its shared border and burgeoning industries, quickly became the first significant hotspot for this new wave of recreational cannabis use. Imagine the vast ranches, dusty trails, and burgeoning towns of the Lone Star State. Here, marijuana was introduced to a new demographic, the working class, cowboys, miners, and railroad workers. For these individuals, life was hard, marked by long hours of strenuous labor. Marijuana was cheap and relatively easy to find, making it an accessible smoke of choice, a simple indulgence offering a temporary escape. Picture a group of dusty cowboys, their faces weathered by sun and wind. They gather around a small fire as the sun dips below the horizon. One pulls out a crude, hand-rolled cigarette, its aroma distinct and earthy. This was marijuana, a communal experience, passed around among friends, offering a moment of camaraderie and gentle euphoria after a long day in the saddle. Miners, deep in the earth, and railroad workers, laying tracks across endless plains, also embraced this plant. It became an integral part of their subculture, a quiet ritual performed in the solitude of camps or the boisterousness of a frontier saloon. It was during this period that the word marijuana, an anglicized adaptation of the original Spanish term, began to seep into common American slang. Initially associated with immigrant communities, its use gradually expanded. This linguistic shift was significant, as it began to differentiate this specific form of recreational use from the broader, long-standing medical and industrial uses of cannabis or hemp. The word itself would soon carry cultural baggage, becoming intertwined with evolving social attitudes and prejudices. Visualize this iconic image: the cannabis cowboys, a lone rider, silhouetted against a setting sun, a wisp of smoke curling from a hand-rolled cigarette. It's a powerful image of freedom, rebellion, and subtle defiance. These were the men who, perhaps unknowingly, laid the groundwork for a new chapter in cannabis's story, one defined by its recreational rather than utilitarian qualities. They breathed life into the legend, adding another layer to the rich tapestry of the Wild West. The introduction of marijuana by Mexican immigrants, its adoption by the working class, and its integration into the cowboy lifestyle created a distinct subculture. This era marked the true birth of recreational cannabis in America, moving beyond accidental use to a more conscious, widespread adoption. The plant, once a humble fiber and ancient medicine, was now actively sought out for its mind-altering properties, entwined with the rugged individualism and adventurous spirit of the frontier. This cultural fusion, however, would soon lead to complex social dynamics, as mainstream American society began to grapple with this new substance and its foreign associations, setting the stage for future conflicts and regulations. In the turbulent, dust-laden landscape of early 20th century Mexico, a figure emerged from the shadows of obscurity to become a legend: Pancho Villa. His life was a whirlwind of contradictions. An outlaw turned revolutionary hero, a ruthless bandit also seen as a champion of the poor. Villa's story, deeply interwoven with the Mexican Revolution, carried a fascinating, often romanticized, connection to cannabis. He was not just a general in the popular imagination. He was the stoner general, a leader whose forces allegedly drew courage and camaraderie from the plant. Imagine the sprawling, sun-baked plains of northern Mexico, the air thick with dust and destiny. Villa's division of the North, a formidable fighting force, was known not only for its fierce loyalty, but also for its distinctive pre-battle rituals. It was said, in whispers and then in song, that his troops would smoke marijuana and drink mezcal before charging into combat. This wasn't merely a recreational pastime. It was believed to be a source of courage, a means to calm nerves and steel resolve. Picture the soldiers, their faces grim and determined, sharing a quiet smoke before the roar of battle erupted. Cannabis, in this context, transcended a simple plant, becoming part of the psychological preparation for war, a shared ritual binding the soldiers together. This unique aspect of Villa's army permeated Mexican folk culture, finding its way into the vibrant tradition of corridos, narrative ballads that chronicled historical events. One of the most famous, La Cucaracha, became an iconic anthem of the Mexican Revolution. Its lyrics, though varied, often contained playful, yet explicit, references to marijuana, with lines like la cucaracha, ya no puede caminar, porque le falta, porque no tiene marihuana que fumar. These songs celebrated not just Villa's military prowess, but also this cannabis-fueled lifestyle, cementing his image as a charismatic, larger-than-life figure. Villa himself lived a life of flamboyant excess. amassing legendary treasure hoards, speeding through the countryside in Mexico's first automobiles, and known for his numerous romantic conquests. And, of course, there was the endless supply of weed, a constant companion to his opulent and tumultuous existence. His persona was a complex tapestry, a Robin Hood figure, yet also a ruthless bandit. This duality only added to his mystique. Imagine quiet evenings at Villa's camps, the scent of marijuana smoke drifting through the air as he planned his next audacious move. It was part of the atmosphere, part of the man himself. A quiet indulgence that underscored his unconventional nature. His connection to cannabis was not hidden. It was celebrated, almost integral, to his public image. Tragically, Villa's life was cut short by assassination in 1923, his legend only growing in its wake. He bequeathed to history the enduring legend of the cannabis-fueled general, a figure who, through folk songs and popular lore, inextricably linked marijuana with courage, rebellion, and the untamed spirit of the Mexican Revolution. This cultural association would, however, soon become a double-edged sword. As the marijuana of Villa's legend crossed borders and began to face a very different and increasingly hostile reception in the United States. By the late 19th century, the era of the wild, untamed American frontier was gradually drawing to a close. The relentless march of homesteaders, railroads, and federal authority slowly brought law and order to the West. This taming had profound implications, including for the quiet, unregulated use of cannabis that had flourished there. As the wild days receded, so too did permissive attitudes towards substances. The once casual use of cannabis began to be viewed through a new, more critical lens. This shift was dramatically exacerbated by the changing demographics of the American Southwest. Mexican immigrants, seeking work and fleeing turmoil, brought with them the cultural practice of recreational marijuana use. As the frontier closed and economic anxieties grew in the early 20th century, anti-immigrant sentiment began to swell. This xenophobia found an easy target in marijuana, which became stigmatized and weaponized, branded as the drug of Mexican immigrants. The plant, previously an accepted part of frontier life, was now portrayed as a dangerous foreign vice, distinct from the respectable hemp of colonial days. Newspapers, eager to sell copies, began to sensationalize stories involving marijuana. Imagine lurid headlines depicting tales of madness, violence, and murder, all attributed to the insidious influence of marijuana. These reports were often exaggerated, poorly researched, or entirely fabricated. Yet they tapped into deep societal anxiety and prejudice. They painted a terrifying picture for the average American, transforming a relatively benign substance into a public menace, a direct threat to the moral fabric of the nation. The subtle rhythms of the plant's quiet history were being drowned out by a crescendo of fear and misinformation. Crucially, the word marijuana itself became a deliberate instrument in this campaign of fear and discrimination. Prior to this period, the plant was generally known as cannabis or hemp. However, propagandists consciously chose to use the Spanish term, marijuana, specifically to stoke anti-immigrant fear. The foreign-sounding word immediately associated the drug with a specific, often vilified, ethnic group. This linguistic strategy was incredibly effective, creating a mental link between a dangerous substance and an othered population, making it easier to gain public support for its prohibition. It was a subtle, yet powerful, act of cultural appropriation and demonization. The transformation was complete cannabis. Once a frontier staple, a quiet comfort for tired cowboys, was now branded a dangerous foreign vice. Its wild days ended not with a whimper, but with a growing roar of alarm. The once unremarkable plant was now wrapped in a shroud of suspicion and moral panic, setting the stage for an unprecedented era of prohibition and criminalization. This chapter marks a profound shift. It was no longer about utility or casual recreation. It was about fear, prejudice, and the control of a substance inextricably linked with marginalized communities. The gentle, slow-flowing rhythm of its integration into American life was abruptly broken, replaced by a swift and brutal campaign to eradicate it. The seeds of this new, hostile perception were firmly planted, and they would germinate into a full-blown war on marijuana in the decades that followed, forever altering its trajectory in the United States. As the 20th century dawned, a wave of social reform and moral purification swept the globe, reaching its peak in the American Prohibition era. The quiet, unregulated existence of cannabis, particularly recreational marijuana, was about to face its most formidable challenge. Interestingly, it was Mexico, not the United States, that took the first decisive step towards widespread prohibition. In 1920, the same year America embarked on alcohol prohibition, Mexico outlawed marijuana. This quietly foreshadowed the tumultuous legal battles that would soon engulf its northern neighbor. The gentle waft of smoke that had once drifted freely across the border was now deemed illicit. The 1930s witnessed the emergence of a powerful and relentless adversary, Harry Anslinger. As the first commissioner of the newly established Federal Bureau of Narcotics, Anslinger became the architect of America's anti-marijuana campaign. He launched an aggressive propaganda blitz, a chilling campaign that meticulously, and often falsely, linked weed to violence, madness, and moral decay. Imagine chilling posters and sensational newspaper articles, depicting young people driven to insanity or committing heinous crimes under its influence. Anslinger's narrative was a potent blend of fear-mongering and racism, deliberately exploiting anti-immigrant prejudices by linking the plant primarily to Mexican and Black communities. The calm, soothing rhythm of objective discourse was entirely absent from his forceful pronouncements. The culmination of Anslinger's efforts arrived in 1937 with the Marijuana Tax Act. This landmark legislation effectively established a federal ban on cannabis across the nation. While framed as a tax law, requiring expensive and cumbersome stamps, its true intent was prohibition. Imagine the quiet panic among those who relied on cannabis for medicine or cultivated industrial hemp. The once common plant was now legally inaccessible, branded as contraband. This act marked a dramatic and unequivocal shift, cementing cannabis's status as an illicit substance, a stark contrast to its long history. However, the legal battles were far from over. Decades later, in 1969, the U.S. Supreme Court delivered a quiet, yet significant, blow to the Marijuana Tax Act. In Leary v. United States, the court struck down the act, ruling it violated the Fifth Amendment by requiring self-incrimination. For a brief moment, it seemed the legal landscape might shift. But this reprieve was short-lived. Just a year later, in 1970, the Controlled Substances Act was enacted, effectively recriminalizing cannabis and placing it in Schedule I, the most restrictive category. This classification lumped cannabis with highly addictive and dangerous drugs like heroin and cocaine, despite its significantly different pharmacological profile. Imagine the pervasive public campaigns of this era, posters with stark warnings, educational films filled with melodramatic portrayals, and news reports consistently painting weed as society's great menace. These images and narratives seeped into the national consciousness, shaping perceptions for generations. Cannabis, once a quiet herbal remedy, then a frontier indulgence, was now officially deemed a severe threat, an enemy of public health and order. The subtle, nuanced understanding of the plant was completely overshadowed by an overwhelming narrative of danger and illegality. This period, stretching from the early 20th century through the 1970s, represents the darkest chapter in the history of cannabis in America. It was an age defined by deliberate misinformation, aggressive enforcement, and the systematic suppression of a plant that had a long, complex, and often beneficial relationship with humanity. The calm, slow-flowing rhythm of historical evolution was replaced by the abrupt, jarring drumbeat of prohibition, leaving an indelible mark on both the plant's legacy and American society. The stage was set for decades of underground culture, legal battles, and a slow, arduous journey towards potential reevaluation. As the tumultuous mid-20th century gave way to the vibrant and often rebellious 1960s, a profound cultural metamorphosis began to reshape America. Quiet compliance was replaced by a burgeoning counterculture, characterized by a questioning of authority, a thirst for peace, and a spirit of experimentation. Amidst swirling changes, the rise of the hippie movement, Woodstock, and protests against the Vietnam War, cannabis, despite its illegality, found a new and potent identity. It became an undeniable symbol of this counterculture, a quiet act of rebellion against established norms, a shared experience that bonded a generation. Imagine the gentle strumming of guitars, the scent of patchouli, and the communal sharing of a joint at a crowded concert or a peaceful protest. Cannabis, once driven underground by prohibition, now re-emerged into public consciousness, not as a menace, but as a statement. It was a defiant rejection of conservative values, a symbol of freedom, individuality, and a more natural way of life. Despite legal risks, cannabis became a common and accepted feature of youth rebellion. Its presence pervasive in college dorms, coffee houses, and communes. Its quiet calming effects provided a stark contrast to the anxieties of a generation embroiled in social upheaval. The late 20th and early 21st centuries have witnessed an astonishing transformation in the legal and social landscape surrounding cannabis. What began as a whisper of change has grown into a powerful movement, reflecting evolving scientific understanding, shifting public opinion, and a reevaluation of past injustices. Imagine the quiet, persistent advocacy of patients, activists, and medical professionals, slowly but steadily chipping away at decades of prohibition. Their efforts, combined with a growing recognition of cannabis's therapeutic potential, have led to a dramatic re-legalization movement across the United States. Today, the statistics speak volumes. A significant portion of the country has embraced cannabis in various forms. 24 states have legalized recreational use, allowing adults to purchase and consume cannabis in a regulated environment, much like alcohol. Furthermore, an additional 14 states have legalized it for medical purposes only, acknowledging its specific applications for treating a range of chronic conditions. This represents a profound reversal from the era of blanket prohibition, a testament to the enduring adaptability of both the plant and human society. Walk into a modern dispensary, and you will find a stark contrast to the illicit, furtive transactions of decades past. Cannabis has reappeared in pharmacies, though these are specialized, regulated establishments. The cannabis extract bottles of the 19th century have been replaced by a dizzying array of sophisticated products, precisely dosed oils, delicious edibles, soothing topicals, and a wide variety of medical strains, each carefully cultivated and labeled to address specific needs. The focus has returned to wellness, informed choice, and the quiet potential of this ancient plant. It is no longer a hidden vice, but a carefully curated product, poised at the intersection of medicine, wellness, and responsible adult consumption. The journey of cannabis in America has truly come full circle, a remarkable odyssey through millennia of human history. From its origins as an ancient medicine in distant lands, to a vital colonial fiber, then to an outlaw's smoke on the American frontier, through the shadows of prohibition, and finally, to its emergence as a multi-billion-dollar industry in modern America. It is a story of quiet resilience, of shifting perceptions, and of an enduring plant deeply intertwined with the human narrative. As our tranquil journey concludes, we reflect on this remarkable transformation. The plant, once a wild weed, now stands as a cultural legend, its story a complex tapestry woven from ancient wisdom, colonial ambition, frontier spirit, and modern-day reevaluation. And perhaps, as you drift into a restful slumber, you might ponder the quiet power of a humble plant, whose journey through the annals of time continues to unfold, whispered softly into the present.